This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide SSDs, 40 gigabit per second network connections, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your server on. It deploys Linux in seconds from the Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distro and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and they have a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line, so definitely go check them out. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, cloning, scaling, and everything else that you want. So definitely get the most out of your Linux node and check them out at linode.com. And check them out at devchat.tv/linode. Hey everybody, and welcome to another MyJS story. This week we're talking to John-Daniel Trask. JD, how's it going?
It's going really well, thanks, Charles. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. Now, we've had you on a couple of episodes of JavaScript Jabber. One of them was fairly recent, actually.
I was surprised you wanted me back so quick.
And you also do a few other interesting things like running Raygun.io.
Yeah, we actually moved to the .com now, so getting big. But yeah, Raygun.com, Raygun.io, they both end up at the same place. Yep. So I sort of shifted from being sort of a day-to-day developer through to being the CEO, where I still try and fulfill my coding cravings in the weekend.
Nice. Now, I'm just going to, for the people who are listening that are interested, you were on episode 154, and that was about 2 years ago, and then 263. And so we talked about Raygun and error reporting and workflow, and then the latest when we talked about moving from Node.js to .NET, which was kind of an interesting thing to dive into, especially since we usually are talking about why people move to JavaScript rather than away from it. So,
yeah, there was a good amount of friendly mocking.
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, it does demonstrate, at least in my mind, that there are all kinds of problems out there and all kinds of people trying to solve them. And, you know, your approach made sense for your problem set. And so, yeah, just interesting stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. I usually ask the same set of questions to everybody. So let's just start at the very beginning. How did you get into programming?
So I started programming when I was about 9 years old. We got a family PC, and so it was an IBM compatible PC. And this was sort of around 92, 93, I think. And it was sort of the Windows 3.11 days with DOS. And I remember I was quite enchanted by the machine. I'd always liked sort of figuring out how things worked. And so I remember being at the DOS prompt, and I had this sort of, I think it was a book from the library that listed out all the commands. And then I got down to the magical QBasic, and I was like, this just looks like edit, like what's going on here? And then managed to print some stuff on the screen and was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And got to that point where the way I describe it now to people is I loved Lego Technic back in the day. Cogs, wheels, making crazy stuff happen. And this just felt like I'd discovered this virtual Lego set that had an infinite number of pieces. Like the only thing stopping me from complete world domination at this point was my own brain, and the 64K limit in QBasic. But that was good. So I started, at the time I had, there were two siblings at home with me, and I remember my parents being like, you're only allowed an hour each, on the computer. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. I want to I didn't know at the time to be able to man, you're totally ruining me getting in the zone here if it's an hour only. And so I started buying the time off my siblings for $1 an hour.
Oh, nice.
And they didn't really care because they were like, oh, we'll just play games another time. So I started building software there, and then through my teenage years got into C and C++, and also a bit of Delphi, and then Visual Basic and PHP ultimately was the sort of web language that I started off on. Yeah. So that was how I got started.
Very cool. And what you describe is something that I find is fairly common among the people who get into it as a kid. They're all about our age. And so,
yep.
those were the computers that were around it when we were kids. I came to it much later than that, but yeah, it's, I had friends that were doing that kind of thing. So,
well, it's like I think we talked about it a little bit on the JavaScript Java show the other day, where I kind of felt like if I was trying to teach a kid these days on how to program, I'd probably start them off on Node, just because, you pull down the one package, you run it up, you write some code, you get really quick time to wow, which I think was really important as a kid, to be going like, oh, cool, I put some stuff on the screen. I mean, I still remember I had this program, I hadn't worked out how to write a loop yet, so I literally just copied and pasted the entire program.
Nice.
So I ran 64K file limit.
That's awesome. Boy, that takes me back to college when we were looking at machine code and unrolling the loops to optimize speed, right?
Yeah.
I know this will run at least 10 times, so yeah, I'm going to reduce the number of iterations and then, anyway, cut some no-ops and jump commands. But yeah, so you get into programming kind of as a kid. How did you kind of grow up into a JavaScript person?
So my first encountering of JavaScript sort of came in the late 90s. So we got the internet in I think it was about late 95, maybe early 96. And so these were the Netscape Navigator days. Mm-hmm. And so I still remember being really confused as a teenager learning this stuff, because you might remember at the time they sort of talked about JavaScript. They also kind of just talked about DHTML,
right,
like that. And then they also had Microsoft going, forget JavaScript. It's all about the VBScript, these days you sit there and you write these when you're writing JavaScript, and you kind of wonder why you'd actually specify the language in the script tag. And it's like, well, I remember genuinely being like, well, which browsers do I want this to run in? And I'd been programming in Visual Basic at the time, so I was like, I kind of know that, but then that doesn't work everywhere. And to be honest with you, I think I joked in the first show with you that if anything, I'm still struggling a bit with the PTSD of JavaScript in the 90s. It's come a really long way now. So that was at the time. But even then, that was super basic stuff, because you were usually doing some goofy effect rather than really writing a heavy front end. I think JavaScript for me really took off a lot with jQuery, where you suddenly started to be able to do a little bit more without writing a crazy amount of code. You'd start doing things like, hey, we want these panels on and off, and that, really how we all ended up learning how to write spaghetti JavaScript before all of those frameworks came along. And I think that was an enlightening time for me with JavaScript, where you kind of were doing more than just, hey, let's make this text bounce or try and bring back a virtual version of the blank tag.
Cool. So you get into JavaScript, and then what? So what have you done with it? What, did you just work in companies for a little while, or did you jump right into entrepreneurship?
Well, I was selling software at high school, and so I've always been reasonably entrepreneurial, and I also did some, did various bits of work for money through university, and I did PC repair at university, ran my own company around that. But I did do 3 years working for a company called Intergen in New Zealand, which was a reasonable sized IT services company down there. And then left and started a company called Mindscape, where we built development tools, and then that kind of morphed slowly into Raygun as it is today. So those were that was my sort of career progression. I was around the same time as I learned to program. That was when I was kind of going, man, this is just so cool. I wonder if you could do this for a living. And then I remember, I think it was looked up in Encarta 94, and I was like, this Bill Gates guy seems to be doing all right out of software. There must be a future in here. And so that was kind of thing. I've always been very polyglot, though, with the languages, and that's partly just a function of, I can't believe, I'm 34 years old and able to say I've got 25 years of programming experience. Just kind of blows my mind. But in JavaScript land, there's a couple of contributions that I've been sort of connected to. One of them is obviously Raygun does JavaScript crash reporting, and also performance monitoring, so how long the front end's taking to. But one of the ones that I was quite proud of, we did this again as a company, but in probably about, I want to say like maybe 6 years ago now, we actually built a Visual Studio extension called Web Workbench. And now a lot of the functionality was ultimately sort of brought over to a standard Microsoft extension called Web Essentials, but we were the first ones that actually brought CoffeeScript to Visual Studio. So we built a whole, had all the syntax highlighting, automatic compilation and all of that. So we got I think there's about 280,000 installs of that for getting .NET developers to start looking at CoffeeScript. I personally quite liked CoffeeScript. I'm quite liking where I'm seeing things going with TypeScript as a bit more of a formal specification with a bigger ecosystem around it. But yeah, so there are a couple of the areas where we've had some sort of influence in the JavaScript community.
Cool, very cool. Yeah, and I've played with Raygun, and I was never really a Visual Studio guy, but yeah, I mean, all of these things solve problems for people. People who want to use CoffeeScript with Visual Studio, people who want to have their errors tracked or their performance tracked or things like that. I mean, all of these things are things that, I don't have to spend time figuring out. It just works because somebody else like you put the time in to make it work.
I'm always amazed at how much stuff is actually out there getting done. Like you kind of, I remember reading, I think it might have been Scott Hanselman talking about dark matter developers as an example. If you actually add up the developers on Twitter and who actually post stuff online and take part in the community, you kind of get this impression that there might be a few 100,000 kind of active developers, and it's really closer to sort of 20 million people actually know how to code.
Yep.
And they sometimes are just the people doing some wizard stuff that's out there. But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. What are you working on these days?
So today, Raygun is pretty much my full-time gig. So that takes up a lot of my time. I spend most of my time in Seattle and also flying back to New Zealand. So we've got offices in the US and New Zealand. And so just keeping an eye on things. I don't do as much active coding on our products, and that's probably good for our customers. Some of the recent things, though, that I mentioned I do some stuff in the weekend. So I recently overhauled the way that Raygun does our fingerprinting and grouping for JavaScript errors, doing things like cross-browser grouping, because browsers might actually look like they're quite different errors, but they're actually the same thing. And that took a lot of work, and that was just a sort of, I kind of knew we could do better and just quietly worked away on that on the side for a couple of months. These days, given my time availability running code, I've been more playing with things where I feel like I should understand them and I don't want to be left behind. So I took some vacation time recently to sit down and learn things like TensorFlow, because I kind of feel like as not an active software developer, the machine learning wave is probably something that I could quite easily not look into and then feel like in 5 years that I was completely incompetent. So I've been playing around with that stuff, but usually it's more that sort of R&D little side things that aren't on the critical path. TensorFlow is also a really good excuse to go and buy a NVIDIA 1080 Ti graphics card and convince myself it was for machine learning and definitely not gaming.
Right. Sounds good. What resources are you using to learn TensorFlow?
Well, I mean, this is one of the amazing things versus when I was a kid, right? Is you just go on the internet and look, and there's just bunches of videos and documentation. I remember, I still remember going and having to buy those computer books that would range from, in New Zealand, that range from like $60 to maybe $120 to buy one book on how to code with something, and it was like, oh my goodness. And then now, I can't really imagine buying a book on programming. So a lot of YouTube content has been really good. I mean, Google are obviously putting a lot of effort behind TensorFlow. So it's been quite interesting.
That's awesome. So I'm also curious, this is something that wasn't in the list of questions, but it seems like different people kind of have different career paths. And in a lot of cases, there's some sort of overarching theme to their career or something that they feel like they've learned over the course of their programming career. Is there something like that for you? Something that you feel like, you know what, if somebody's been watching me for the last 20 years or so doing code, what would they have learned?
It's a good question. I kind of think, that everybody, I think when I talk about being polyglot and not really being overly religious about programming languages, I kind of mean it out of the fact that I've just moved across so many different ones, and everybody sees these things written down where it's like it's not the programming language, it's really up to the developer and how they structure their code. You usually see these arguments around like never use PHP. Well, Facebook uses PHP, but they wrote their own version, and it goes backwards and forwards. And it's kind of like, man, you can make a million excuses for just needing to actually put in the hard work. And I think that's something I learned over the long term. I mean, one of the things I always sort of say to people is a bunch of people like, especially grandmas, they'll be like, oh, you learned to code when you're 9, you must be some sort of genius. And I'm like, no, I'm actually kind of stupid in the fact that it's more that I would just keep banging my head against the wall until I break the wall down, So that's one thing. I kind of look at almost every programming language or development methodology as being somewhat fleeting. Adopt the best practices, but there's always new ones coming along and better ways to do things. So just always be thinking about things critically and don't just go with something because it happens to be the flavor of the month.
Right. So one other question I want to ask, and this is somewhat code related, I guess, but you've been fairly successful with Raygun. And I know some people are out there thinking, you know what, I want to go out, I want to start my own company, write a bunch of code, sell a SaaS product, something like that. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spend a lot of time advising businesses. I especially love working with developers who are moving into that business sense because I'll be honest, a lot of engineers I talk to seem to have a very poor grasp on the economics of things. And you often see that with the build versus buy mentality. If somebody thinks the answer to everything is build it, you're probably not ready for business because you never get anything done. I also see people that struggle with that whole starter, not finisher. There's that recursive loop of have an idea, start working on it, prove the concept, have an idea, course itself again. So I like to work with people around those challenges. The big thing I would say, for all of the noise that we hear out of the Valley and capital raisings and all of that is just that. It's noise. No one should really be celebrating capital raises other than the people who go through the challenge of doing it. That should probably be a quiet whiskey rather than every news page on the internet bleeding about it. It's the start of a marathon, not the finish. Capital is very much an input to business, not necessarily what your ultimate goal is. And so I try to get folks to not think about that. I also recommend in the software realm, again, with a computer and some free time, or making some free time, you can actually build something fairly significant without any external capital. These days you can run, you could go grab an AWS instance, heck, you get it for free, or $5-10 a month, write some code. The most expensive thing for most businesses that are in software is how much they've got to pay their software developers, right? So if you've got that magical skill set, I see no reason with things like Stripe and your own skills and the cheapness of server infrastructure why you couldn't get a revenue-generating business created before ever thinking about needing to go and get capital for it. I understand why hardware businesses need capital up front, but you should be able to build a side business without too much stress.
Right. Sounds good. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about before we do picks?
No, you've stayed pretty far from all of my deep, dark secrets and incriminating things, Well,
you can pay me later.
Dude, no, that's kind of everything I think relating to JavaScript off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just want to point out too, though, that a lot of what we're talking about here with JD's journey is, in my opinion, at least, perseverance. And he had a computer when he was a kid, and that probably gave him a leg up learning to code. But one of the reasons why I do these episodes is just to show people, you know what, JD's a guy. He's normal like everybody else, and you know what? He just went out and delivered. And so if you want to learn to code, if you want to start a business, if you want to do any of these things, there's some know-how involved, but for the most part, just get in there, figure out how to do it, and then get it done.
Like I say, not smarts, it's tenacity. If anything, I probably look pretty stupid a lot of the time.
Well, I know a lot of really, really intelligent people, and they're not necessarily the people that are out there doing these kinds of things or being successful in these ways. It really is the people who just stick it out.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
All right, well, do you have some picks for us? Some things you want to shout out about? For you, the listeners of My JavaScript Story, LootCrate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at LootCrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. LootCrate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out LootCrate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings.
Yeah, so I thought I would stick to the geeky for this. So I have a few things here. One of them was a product that I stumbled across recently, which was something that I wish when we were first sort of building software products and we needed to do licensing, I thought this could be useful, especially in the tone of, hey, maybe there's some developers out there who are thinking of starting a business. And it doesn't necessarily need to be SaaS, but we used to have, desktop software and components you'd install and they would have licensing keys, right? So I stumbled across Keygen.sh, which is it's actually a SaaS service that gives you a really nice developer experience around when you need to manage your users and their licensing. So if you were setting something up and needed an easy way to more or less license your software and manage it, it kind of feels to me like the Stripe of licensing. It's a really nice approach to it. So that's one I'd like to give a shout out to. The other one that I wanted to shout out to is my friends over at Octopus Deploy. So I don't know if you come across these guys at all, but they're based out of Australia. So another sort of South Pacific business taking it to the world. And what we've been using their products for just years for managing our deployment of our software. So the back end of our stuff, as you sort of pointed out, is mostly .NET, but you can deploy much more than that. They sort of started out focusing very heavily on the .NET crowd and just gives us that ability to one-click deploy or roll back and keep notes and all that. And I just think they're doing a really good job at making life easy there. There was also something, and I can't find the link now, that was what I was trying to type earlier, was I did see something the other day where somebody had written in JavaScript a cut-down version of .NET to run inside the browser around UI controls. I saw it on Hacker News, and I was like, man, that is just, it's like you see there's that guy, I think his name's, I forget his last name, his first name is Fabris, who keeps building all these crazy bits of software and has this really plain-looking website, but he was the one that wrote the, I think it was the JavaScript sort of x86 emulator inside the browser that can boot the Linux kernel. Like it's just insane, the stuff this guy makes, but very cool.
Very cool. I'm going to go ahead and pick a few things that are more along the lines of sort of the personal quality of life stuff. So I have a book that I've read a few times that I really like, and I keep going into and out of the habit of doing what it recommends. It's called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and it just talks about having a morning routine and getting into the groove in the morning. And when I do it, I have much better days than when I don't. And so I don't know why I don't do it every day, but I guess that's part of the human experience here. But yeah, so I found a few apps that help me with some of this stuff, and so I'm going to just call them out really quick. The first one, the app is just called Meditation. It's on the iPhone. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they have an Android version, but I haven't looked. And what it is I think I had to pay for it, but then you can download a whole bunch of different meditations. And so I just put my earbuds in, and then I run through a meditation as part of my Miracle Morning every morning. Another thing that I've been using, I just put my affirmations into the Notes app on my iPad so I can look at that. But then I'm trying to remember, it's visioning, so I have a vision board app that I've picked up as well. And I don't love it, but it's nice to be able to just look at the pictures and kind of, think through, okay, today I'm going to do this, so I have pictures of like me with my wife or me with my kids. And so it's, today I'm going to do this, with them or for them. I have pictures of money and other things related to the business. And so it's, today I'm going to be interviewing JD, and I'm going to be interviewing Amir Rajan, who does Ruby motion development for the Ruby podcast. And, I have Adventures in Angular today. And so I kind of can vision through, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. I have pictures of the Mormon temple on there, and things like that, to kind of, okay, I'm going to be doing these kinds of things. I'm going to keep this kind of mindset, spiritually. And anyway, it's really nice to be able to just sit and look at it. I have a picture of a Ford F-150 truck because I would like to buy one someday. So you kind of get the idea as far as that goes. And the only issue I really have with it is that it's kind of hard to get pictures onto the board, and their search feature when you're looking for pictures to put on the board really suck. But other than that, it works, and it's a nice app for that. And then the last thing that I'm going to pick is I have a whole bunch of journals, and that's one of the last things you do in the Miracle Morning is you write in your journal. And, so just some journaling. So I have one that I got off of LootCrate, and it looks cool. I'm not a fan of the show, but it's a Game of Thrones journal. And then I found this really, really cool Zelda themed journal online, and so I bought it off of Amazon. So if I can find a link to the Game of Thrones one, I'll put it up, and I'll put a link in for the Zelda one as well. But yeah, just cool stuff. So anyway, if you're looking for a way to kind of boost your productivity and have better days, The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod is a terrific book.
Cool. I might check that out. I quite like a lot of that personal development stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So JD, if people want to follow you on Twitter or GitHub or see what you're working on these days, what are the best places to do that?
Well, I typically use the same handle everywhere, which is Trask JD, Trask JD, which was my high school computer login, and I'm just, like I said, I'm not very creative, never changed it. So I'm that on Twitter. I think I'm the same on GitHub. But yeah, so that people can reach out to me on Twitter. They can also email me at jdtrask@raygun.com. Always happy to hear what people are up to and help them out if there is a way that I can help them out.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, but thank you for coming and sharing your story.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Charles.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.